as you're watching that game, as a guy that played at Gonzaga, as a guy that lived through the I don't want to call it a collapse, but the loss against UCLA
Just call it what
in
it was.
2006, right? You're up by 8, 52 seconds left in that game. Missed free throws, more missed free throws. Jaime Hawkins is getting buckets. What are you thinking down the stretch of that game?
Well, first off, you go back to that game you mentioned with Adam Morrison. So that was a year when I was playing in the NBA, but I was hurt. So my season was over. And I traveled down with my wife and our daughter at the time, and they're up at halftime comfortably. I call the airlines, and I make flight reservations, and I call the hotel. This was before the app where you could just do it easily. I had hotel and flight reservations dialed in for the Final Four that year. And then that was the debacle that you were referencing. Tonight, when UCLA made that big run at the end, we missed free throws. Jaime Hawkins made some plays. You're like, oh my gosh. There was a quick second where in that Gonzaga fan section, it was deflating because I spent some of the time down on the court in the media row and some of the time up top, and it was an interesting couple of minutes for sure.
What's going on with, and I got to ask you this because you're the Gonzaga guy, what's going on with the first halves for Gonzaga? 3 games, 3 first halves, subpar,
Yeah.
and then the second half, it's like they just figure it out. They play with more pace.
No, that's a good question. It's something that, I've called the Gonzaga Regional Games TV for a number of years now, and I've seen this group 25 times or so in person this year. But towards the end of the year, they've had slow starts. And, give the guys credit, but give the staff credit for figuring out the adjustments that they have to make. Because that first half, defensively, UCLA was getting everything they wanted. Gonzaga really wasn't resisting any type of cuts, any type of dribble penetration. And Coach Few and staff did a really good job of however they lit the fire in the locker room at halftime. They did it, and they played unbelievably well for about probably 16-minute stretch, and then that last 2.5 minutes were kind of iffy, but they got it done.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about Julian Strawther. All right, he's a guy I think you can call him the X factor of this group. Maybe he's kind of what you're going to get from Timmy. You kind of know what you need from the guards, and then to me, it's when Strawther plays great. That's when Gonzaga takes that step and they become great. He wasn't
the Robin.
Yes,
he's a Robin. He's Timmy's Batman. He's Robin.
Yep.
They need Robin to be good.
He was playing okay, right?
Yeah.
Got it going a little bit towards the end of the second half, and then he hit that 3, and then he got the steal at the end that clinched it. But
Well, I read an interesting stat today coming into tonight's game when Strawther in his career scores 15 points or more. Gonzaga was 27-1, and I think he had 2 points in that first half.
Yeah.
And there were, some people like, what's going on? Strawther didn't look great in the first half.
He only took 2 shots.
He didn't look great in the first half. Hickman and Bolton struggled, I think, with the physicality that UCLA plays with on the perimeter. And so they needed a lift in the second half from Strawther. And then Salas played well in the second half. He got them playing with a pace, getting the ball out on the floor before UCLA gets set. And then Smith was tremendous, I thought, down the stretch. I mean, he's had an up and down season from watching him up close, but you knew he was a big-time player because he was a player of the year in his conference, and he's had tremendous games, and they needed it tonight, and he played well.
He's much better when he can pound the air out of it a little bit, it seems
I
like.
think so. He's a guy who plays, and this is getting nitpicky, coach speak. He plays straight up and down a little bit, but the thing you love about him is he is not afraid of taking big shots or having a big assignment defensively down the stretch.
Yeah. There's been so many great Drew Timme games. In my opinion, this was one of those all-time games because he held them up in the first half. He was the only guy in the first half that was doing anything. Had to get something going. He wore them down, and he held them up just enough. And as far as his games go, and you've covered a lot of them, where does this rank?
It's got to be up towards the top.
It's got to be.
I mean, you look at what do you end with? 36.
36 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, 16 for 24 from the floor. Today's episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play college basketball pick'em, where you can get a little extra sweat during March Madness and win real cash prizes simply by picking player stats in this weekend's games. In pick'em, all you do is predict whether a player will go higher or lower on Underdog's projected totals, whether that's points, rebounds, whatever. For example, if you're like me and you think Zach Edey is going to go nuts in this tournament, pick higher on his points projection, add up to 4 more picks, and if you hit them all, you can win 20 times your money on a single game. Underdog's slick mobile app is easy enough that dummies like Jeff Goodman have even figured it out. So go to UnderdogFantasy.com or download the app and use the code FIELD, FIELD, and Underdog will match your deposit up to $100. Now is the time to get in on the madness. So remember, UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code FIELD. According to my sources, 16 for 24 from the floor is pretty damn good.
Well, your sources are right, Rob. That's for sure. But he kept them in it in the first half. I think he had 15 of their first 17. He hit a trail three that at least that's not what you want to see on a consistent basis. But what it does is it puts a little bit more doubt in UCLA's big's mind. Like, hey, Mick Cronin's probably been telling me not to close out past the free throw line all week. Now he hits one. Kind of puts you in the gray area a little bit as a defender. But he's had so many good games throughout his career that it's hard to pinpoint and pick just one. But tonight was unbelievable because of the setting, because of the fact that they needed it. Not just the early start from him, but they needed the plays down the stretch to come back, get the lead, and then hold UCLA off.
Field of 68 after dark. We are on Sirius XM. We are streaming over on the YouTube channel. Jump in the chat, ask us some questions. We're going to be answering them during our breaks in the after. It's presented by our partners over at Bet Rivers, our partners at Underdog Fantasy. If you use the code FIELD, you get a 100% deposit match up to $100, Dan, at Underdog Fantasy. How about that? What happened? What switched? Like, how did Gonzaga go from being a team that couldn't get any stops in the first half of this game to being a team that held UCLA and Tiger Campbell and Jaime Hawkins? Like, I was ready to come on here and talk about how Tiger Campbell was the best point guard in America. And I was ready. Jaime Hawkins played phenomenal. Like, what switched? How did they get better defensively?
Well, I think in the first half they were late to their defensive assignments, whether there were switching opportunities based off of what they were doing against certain sets, or whether it was just in gap helps, being late to getting in the gap, and then when you're late to get in the gap and you have to react to penetration, then you're late to recovering out of the gap. And I think in the second half, in the first half they were reactive. In the second half, they were the aggressor defensively. I think that was a big key.
I also think offensively, Rob, they started scoring and they started playing with a lot more pace.
Yeah.
And so now UCLA in the first half, they were getting some buckets in transition and semi-breaks where they're not going against a set defense. In that second half, that offense was moving. It was clicking. And a lot of times people like to say, well, defense can lead to offense. I thought offense led to better defense for Gonzaga, especially in that second half.
Yeah, and that's been the case a lot over the years because, let's call it what it is. Gonzaga's an offensive juggernaut. Defensively, they've been really good in certain years.
Sure.
The 2017 year where they made the Final Four, Zach Collins, Shimmick Karnowski in the paint, protecting the rim. And then the Chet Holmgren, you're not going to be able to finish at the rim very easily. This year's been a work in progress. Since about February, they've gotten much, much better.
The guards have gotten better.
They have. They've gotten better at fighting over screens. Rotationally, they've gotten better. But I think another big piece is when you score the way that they can, that allows you to pick and choose what you're going to do defensively. Are you going to pick up three-quarter court and trap, which they've showed on occasion? Are you going to get back and communicate out your matchups? Because if you miss and you're running back in transition, just trying to stop the ball and then match up, you're already behind. Your philosophy from the jump.
Yep. I felt like you guys wore down UCLA. And keep in mind, Adim Bona, he's out. Jalen Clark is out. I felt like UCLA's depth played a role today.
Absolutely.
Played an absolute role. And even so, more so with Bona today, because rebounding differential, you guys dominated the boards. 50-26 in favor of Gonzaga.
I didn't realize it was that much.
50-26.
That's been an emphasis for as long as I can remember. This goes back a long time to when I played, but we got absolutely obliterated from Michigan State on the glass years ago, and ever since then, that has been a focal point of Coach Few's philosophy: is we have to be great on the glass, and I think it speaks to it. You're talking about a Pac-12 team that's about to move to the Big Ten, and everybody talks about the bruisers in that league. Well, Gonzaga went up against some bruisers, minus Bona, obviously, and handled the glass. So when it's needed, they can do it. But I didn't realize it was a plus 24 advantage. That's
large.
The fact that UCLA could keep it to a 3-point game and being beat that badly on the glass shows a lot for UCLA.